Anyone not right? Yeah, right. Oh, it's right. Yeah, you can go. Okay. Your ballot, your privilege, indigenous self-determination, anything else is unethical and complicit with native genocide and more radical alternatives. The state is here and we can't reverse the past. The movements of placing demands on the state is the best option for native kids. 14 indigenous people are united in the struggle to survive as distinct people with the existing electricity to survive against colonize and take the gift of no God give them despite the something incorrectly believe the indigenous people wanted to the unattainable past the opera. State is closer to the truth. The time only moves toward the self-determination will look forward differently into the future. Colonialization, imperialism, impacts cannot be reversed, so we have to move forward by challenging the ongoing injustices of centuries of colonialism and plus the market of the honor. Indigenous lands, they can be returned to the original condition. Control can be returned to the indigenous people to accept the inherent authority to self-determine non-indigenous. Majority expect the indigenous people to forego their claims and to accept the assimilation of the indigenous. The self-determination is denied more than just a starting point to require the greater consideration of the indigenous people view as part of the settler majority reason to minimize the obligation towards the indigenous people. Most of the settler who benefit from the colonial history is believe that they should not pay the needs for their ancestors and other populations out of with they convince themselves that no sense of being committed to the indigenous people are often for sale. Focus on asserting their claims to the primary outside of the existing set of global institutions they are destroying now. Indigenous self-determination involves a complex debates about what self-determination means and how the states of indigenous people can achieve it. The next impact framing when inevitably realize on calculations that are incoherent when weighed against a relative. The reality of native genocide self-determination is the only first order consequence of Ivanovich and 15. Ethics are better understood as a bottom-up process, deciphering the implicit values of the underlying decision-making practices, values infused with the decision-making from the various of the decision-making of the value ways that they are to differentiate the individual criteria, the calculable moderation of the validity of utilitarian system to the greatest benefit over the left little group for the stakeholder values the contestants have the right human dignity we organize almost over the outcome of the utilitarian the calculus of First Nation people to discuss their resource management of the issue that resource manager for shared with the Aboriginal communities unwilling to allow that they have discovered the adequate of the compensation who asked whether they would agree to sell his daughter and disagree from running the benefits of the First Nation people are unwilling to compromise on the principles without respect to the land of the decision-making modern emphasis the values of the reality of the perception regarding the risk perception of the risk of both the to the human health of the environmental impact. There's no such thing as risk in life. The different of the personality success risk differently the human factors of management decision of the decision-making process of the job ethics to identify the critical is very what is the ethical dimensions of the water management decisions, white subjectivity response to the claims of native genocide repositioning, extinction, Preston in 17. The existential threat is one of the great negation of the elimination of the subject and denial of the social justice can be dehumanization of the threats made of the totalitarian as much as through the word of the environment of the genocide have the great joy ethic and cleansing purposes they the eugenic threats based on the genetic and moral superiority of the threats but with the racial groups may be existential there's a short type of the psychic and the real extermination of the preparation for the existential threat of the eugenic prioritizes the survival of more more than others unwittingness of prejudice and making it less likely to blame the people who survive the existential fear of whiteness in the negation of existence and advantage one is self-determination. The current court doctrine undermines any self-determination. Tribal rights are taken into account only over issues that are deemed traditional Indian activities, while the broad regulation applies to the tribal lands without challenge, earnest intent. Indian canons developed to protect their tribal sovereignty. Implicit disinvesture seeks to protect the non-Indians by limiting the sovereignty to the actions that are consistent with the Indian status accord. Selective link with the canons to support their other tribal rights and the traditional activities where the court is comfortable with the self-government when the tribes engage in the activity they seem to westernized and protect the sovereignty to affect would affect the non-Indians. The court is subject to the court implies the Indian canon treaties must be interpreted the Indians would have to understand the ambiguity be contracted in the favor of the Indians absent the risk of the sovereignty may not be diminished as this protected the tribal sovereignty gets back into regression of the attention is not likely imputed by Congress to Supreme Court is an expensive attack on tribal sovereignty. Chevron has created an inconsistent patchwork of precedents that undermine the tribal sovereignty. Supreme Court action is key hauling forward. The court must resolve this matter regarding the Indian candidates and Chevron. The court sees may seize the opportunity to examine the federal anti-law dilemmas presented when the court reviews the agency interpretation. The Chevron dictates the court should defer the ambiguity should be resolved in the favor of the Indian underlying Chevron is implicit as an allegation of the ambiguity law. The question is whether Congress has made the implicit delegation of the Indian statute. The answer is another subject would not be diminished without congressional intent. The court would hold that the Indian law can trump Chevron. Court action is key only the implementation of a rights-based framework protects the tribal sovereignty from arbitrary violations. Project Sana, Heaven 17. Durable protection allowed the construction to occur to the violation of the treaty rights, and the courts have heard to rule that the rights alone created legal bias to challenge the action. This diminishes the sense of the treaty rights as a law. The court doctrine creates a no-win scenario. The lack of a framework illustrates the fallacy of the supremacy clause situation. Begs for reconsideration of the difference of tribal treaties are due. That lack of self-determination is violent, denies the value to life, and is a mechanism to ensure of native erasure and genocide. Murphy enforcing self-determination is basic in need of the fundamental of the world being the self-determination and improve the indigenous physical, mental health, and the control of the domination of the factor. The fact that they all health and morality, self-determination, appeal, regulated by the members of the distinct of the political community working together to determine the policies that shape the individual and the collective future of the collective deliberation and reflects one's cultural norms and the laws of self-determination, restrictive intent, pressures, and security and disparity for the indigenous people in the primary caused by the causal factors behind their tragic physical and mental outcomes the indigenous people are suffering from them disproportionately in comparison with their non-indigenous populations, and specifically that lack of self-determination is causing water crisis on native lands. 18. Indigenous communities protect the water is the utmost important. The water initiatives that broader cultural survival strategy given the distinct of the regulatory authority, the connection to the land of these diverse cultures and the terms of well positioned to drive the innovation of the water government. The agency is unwilling to provide the desired level of protection of the access to the safe water and the disposal facilities is disproportionately low. The problem reflecting the environmental justice issues, the environment and the public health are less effectively protected on the reservations and elsewhere. The tribal treatment is that a state of the amendments and the CWA intended to receive from the tribal. The standards may be more stringent than their neighbors. There's a gap between vision and reality. Life left between the TS to increase the tribal environmental self-determination. Lack of clean water causes massive structural violence. It affects every facet of native survival and is a literal silent poisoning of indigenous people out of existence. Grow live and 16. Inadequate water conservation lead to the health problems that cancers also sign up. The cancers are also pneumonia, the rates of morbidity, mortality of water surfaces, the important determinant of the status and reducing the transmission of the disease and led radiation from the soon valve. The water of the court of the well, so the contaminated the court of the water, contaminated with the bacteria schools cannot operate without clean water. The water related closures contribute to the education gap. The absence of the clean water contributed to the poverty and unemployment memorial. The talent to the access to the primary the job without water. The tribes cannot provide irrigation plan solves this. It forces EPA to resolve treatment as the state disputes in favor of tribal sovereignty. 98. Nothing in the statute mandates the finding that the tribal jurisdiction of the water can be before a tribe can be treated as a state of the plain meaning of the word indicated congressman to allow the EPA to treat tribes as the state of the tribe manage of the water resources. No matter who owns them, the EPA should have the duty to contribute the statute liberally and resolve the ambiguity, the expression of the net, to the benefit of the Indian. The federal common laws involving the objection that the ambiguity existed. It would be the more beneficial for the tribes of the EPA to have interpreted the act and the confirmation and delegation of the authority in contention. 3 is solvency. The plan, the Supreme Court of the United States should apply Indian law canons of construction at Chevron. Step 2, the plan maintains native self-determination by requiring a strong defense of tribal rights on 4. The court must look in step 2 of the interpretation restricts the Indian rights if not the Chevron is appropriated. It is not the Indian condition term Chevron, regardless of the two principles should be applied, but no defense is given to the interpretation that diminishes Indian rights. Indian law cases are unique of the Indian. In the Indian law, with the congressional tendency requirement for the diminishment of the rights and the doctrine such as Chevron should not apply to both to affect both the ambiguity. The executive is the fiduciary duty to the Indians must be that Indian canons must be enforced as soon as the ambiguity is recognized. The Indian law condition should be applied. The can is permanent. The different is a reasonable interpretation by the agency. Interprets the statute in a way that opposes the restriction of the Indian rights of the Indian. The can should override Chevron applying statutory construction at step 2 is the best middle ground allows the courts to protect the canon while maximizing the agency expertise on other issues by Burger. 8. Step 2, construct an ordinary solution for the part of the judges with a clear explaining that the canon should be explicit about which aspect should without to trigger the canon which should contribute to the analysis of the signature to set the limit of the judicial the interpretive authority and the space for the administration policy making incorporated the case-by-case application of the number of the canon the Chevron step 2 offers a framework for analyzing the comparative the strength of the court of the agency step 2 framework focus the preference to the political decision making and the judicial modesty flexibility and the reflection of the constitutionality inspired there you know just that agency rule making is uniquely bad for Native Americans and Archaea. 93. The court has demonstrated the skepticism of the executive ability to administer the worship of the Chevron represented the change in the court assessment of the non-factors motivating Chevron indicated the judiciary should stop using canons. Okay, mark the canon.
what evidence do you read that says indigenous nations need the state to recognize their self-determination in order to have self-determination?
Well, in the status quo, the way that the state has constructed it, the 1AC would indicate, as per the wounds evidence, that we have to move forward within the current system. Makes a couple of warnings for that.
Wait, I don't understand. That doesn't seem like an answer to my question. You were saying
The answer to your
indigenous
question is
nations
the
don't
wounds
have
and the hall
sovereignty
evidence.
now,
Yeah.
don't have self-determination now, we need to give it to them.
Yeah, the wounds and the whole evidence, as I was answering your question for.
That evidence says that indigenous people cannot have self-determination unless they get recognition from an external other like the state. That is your argument, correct?
No, we will not defend, we have applied the state action in the sense of allowing natives to have self-determination.
Okay, so the state has to allow that. The wounds evidence
if that's
discusses
the
a
language
cultural
article.
connection to the land. What does the act do for indigenous people who have been moved onto reservations to which they have no cultural connection?
Solomon, you want to answer that?
We don't think that that's a relevant consideration.
Oh yeah, that's irrelevant. Okay, how do you
mean,
solve
it's-
pollution in
Not
water?
sure.
The argument. So we've
What's
made a
like
couple
you
of
said?
claims. The diver evidence indicates that oftentimes on native lands, their water standards are actually far stricter than the status quo. However, on native lands and reservations currently, they're not allowed to have access or control over their own water. Tribal amendments to
So,
the things such
what I
as
don't
the CWA have
Yeah,
proven this.
that's fine, but water doesn't like follow borders. So how do you solve like, for
The
example,
tribe evidence is
wait, let me
actually
finish. I haven't asked a
extremely.
question. Companies that are like upstream of on a
Yes.
river of
Yeah.
indigenous land, why can't they just pollute? on
That's
their
the
own?
point of the
That's the
tribe
point that we
evidence,
have,
that's
yeah.
why
So you
these
give
current
them
provisions
sovereignty
fail.
outside their reservation.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
so
tribe
over the
evidence
whole
is
US.
very good
Yes,
about
the
the
plan
plan
affects-
results in a ability
Here,
for natives to
I
control.
got this. The plan affects every aspect of Chevron deference, which means as per the driver evidence, which it also indicates we affect upstream like issues, which means post-plan, natives can bring those like cases to court with a plan
Oh, so-
mandates that those cases are resolved in the favor of
To
natives.
clarify, your plan mandates that you take Indian law canons and apply it to the Supreme Court. It doesn't require that you like give indigenous people themselves any institutional power, correct?
No, we would.
We would argue that the Indian cans themselves are a form of institutional power.
Sure. What do you think is the connection between debate and policy enactment?
We don't take a stance.
You
What
don't
if
take
he
a
doesn't
stance
defend
on that?
that? No.
So then, what is the point of all this? Why are we here?
We think
What is
it's
the
a,
value of your
I'd say
heuristic?
we're both here to win.
Okay, but why is that process productive? You have presented a heuristic, like obviously fiat's not real. Why do you think it's
You
productive?
can make this argument the 1C. As of
Yeah,
right
we're
now,
going
1C
to, but
doesn't
I'm giving you a
defend
chance to defend yourself, but it doesn't seem like you want to, so that's good.
that. No, 1C doesn't defend that.
Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, we're not this.
What page do you want us to put case on?
Self-determination.
Solvency?
Yeah, solvency is better.
Solvency is better?
Yeah.
Give me 1 second here. Just one.
okay, that shows
Let me get this open. Did you clear out focus on them?
Yeah.
Can you turn that off or down, please? Thank you, Gary. Give me a second, I'm having internet issues, my,
You're good, I'm trying
says I can't download it.
Fruit snacks. Yeah, some fruit snacks.
Best part about college debate, they have snackrams.
Oh yeah, you see what's the best for that?
Yeah, the candy.
Green. Alright, are good? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Alright, is anybody not ready? Alright. Alright. The
1AC focused on reclaiming sovereignty land, even if it pretends to be non-Western or collective, is still fundamentally commensurated within the liberalist understanding of power that's man. 16, sovereignty and the possession are the fundamental liberal concepts fully commensurate with the liberal assumptions. First, as signature statutes on the Convention. Second, on the right to represent the Constitution. Third, the meaning of the rising of the powers terms central to the colonialism, even if discourse is mobilized in opposition. That's just a consumer voting. It's undiminished history of coexistence on the single sovereignty. Sovereignty has become a big part of the problem. Is it limited in ways that are able to think in? The act really produces a new form of racism called a differentialized racism. This ethnicizing of borders is naturalized internal and external forms of native-find. That's Charma 9. Diversity of cultures and traditions are seen as insurmountable, differing from the previous hegemonies of race ideologies. Does not rely on the biological concept of race as a form of racialized to push the difference of people should not be in their own places. This has been called the differentialized racism. This is an anti-misogynistic character of neo-racism that through its stems the basis assumption that the ethnic boundaries are natural borders. Such interpretations into constructive forms of community that normalize patriarchal elitists and exploitation of social relation to the center of the culture within a neo-racist discourse in terms of continuing the devotion to genealogical health by the racism origin studies, stories within the neo-racism laying the basis for anti-historical lens, the count as the lens of emphasizing group racism. They said that held so solely by their state of the places. Notions make identity possessive identity, since the identity is often they have to do within existing systems to make the group claims to resources. And the 1AC is still haunted by the classical logic of hegemony. Their engagement is based on a politics of articulating and desired demands. This makes the failure of their politics inevitable because their mode of action gets caught up in the ethics of desire. That's day 5. Liberal pluralism to be seen as the case of the politics demand. This assumes a dominant notion in which we must be persuaded to give the gifts of recognition and integration originalized to include an ever-expanding set of struggles which emerges out of the gender centrality, ability, age, and so on. My argument is not that the identity politics is inadequate because it is not based on symbolic construction, but that it faces independent and inherent in the politics demand. Its mode of action is caught up in the ethics of desire and those repetition of the self-defeating act. It only perpetuates conditions move beyond them. In terms of politics, the action driven by the ethics of the realist alternative relies upon hitting over the hope that the state of incorporative forms are somehow capable of emancipation by avoiding demands. It offers a way out of this cycle, which is justification for sophistication on the dismissal and control. And their circulation of knowledge through academia serves to greater the flow of information capital as book 18. Academia committed to the production of post-creative subjectivity, neoliberal rising cannot be overcome. We are interchangeable human idea and thinking because our knowledge is interchangeable. The network flows of the empire, research and resources determine our production of information and capital. When we remain lost in our own indifference to it all, when we participate, we produce content, but in effect, the message is to exchange for circulation, serving the greater flows of information and capital. What they produce only lends to them to be to their thingness and their submission to the flows of neoliberal capital. Cultural critical critique is in the service of stabilizing neoliberal horizon. It is already what if information capital doesn't reduce in all things the commodification of data, algorithm, and probabilities. Deconstruction is the thought of the empire mirroring the work of algorithms, information technologies, which are constantly fractional repackaging information into ever greater configuration as a capital potential. And externalizing ethics on institutions is bad. As Rousseau, for the legal system tries to erect ends that can be realized only by power. No, the conflict should be solved without the intervention of law, unless its authority be undetermined. The law has to present itself as indispensable. The mere escape of the law is the less responsible than the individual becomes responsibility towards others. This delegated authority of the law legal institution exonerate me from non-responsibility, breaking the more proximity that makes it ethics possible. I am no longer obliged to another, and his preferences. Law regulate affairs between individuals and rights. They're anonymous, making it easy for me to ignore justice and exert violence. But as at the present, many existence being threatened by the possibility of being signaled as guilty and indeterminate offense. And the alternative is not a new mode of politics, but a no to the affirmative. You should bracket the question of the plan and evaluate the rhetorical justifications. Only this intervention breaks apart debates, tangential fantasy, and opens the gap to a mode of political subjectivity capable of inaugurating change. That's law number 12. Politics is the practice of working through specific demands. Accusative to the split within the subject. The demand is a demand to be recognized given the section of the symbolic order. The failure in circles reveals something dangerous in the demand. The shooter of power. The demand relies on the fact that ego is driven by the repetition or refusal demands of fulcrum numbers. The identity of the subject or produced subjects are articulated through language. The demand presupposes the ability to addresses the to fulfill the demand. The other cannot ever give this. This is preserves the presumption that the demand is exerting agency. The kind of is the opposite. The more firmly one lodges the demand, the more desperately one clings to the ability to the institution to fulfill the demands on reach a breaking point with the inability to proffer the response should produce a reevaluation of the economy, the demand and desire. The economy, the demand is stripped away from the desire and then underwrites the just laid bare. The result is the subject of decision related to desire, but as the political disposition. The point is to bring the subject to the point that they might recognize the name they're desiring and become a political subject, able to argue for something without being dependent on the other as organizing principle. Political subjugation, not orientation towards a demand, is subject to fixated demand, for the possibility of desire. The what appears as agency a surrender is a surrender of the desire of enjoying, figuring the other as one that be capable to satisfy the demand, and is registered the content demands that are claims of the action, powerful at the level of for demand is the surrender of the address, never breaks free from its framing of the master. The demand is a way of organizing political enjoyment requires systems to continue to act in certain ways to sustain its logic, with symbolic descent represents an effective affirmation of its own order. You should get more cards right. The start with an analysis of fantasy and desire. Anything else ensures co-option and zero policy fair. That's Fotaki. 10. The motivation for Lacanian subject is always the desire to retrieve the illusionary unity that has been sacrificed upon entry into the symbolic order. The fantasy of effective policy and the modernist society also from an inseparable desire for unity, the desire to attain the lost part of the self, and states the articulation of them. Proud politics only in the opportunity whom it arrives political expenditure can prompt such a move. The imaginary construction of policy making, if and knowledge leads to the multiple splicity underscores this fair. This use as abstract models simplify the human decisions and avoiding them in the real life messiness interest of policy is distant from the organization reality. Lacanian analysis of policy making gives us conceptual tools to explore how the inherent idealization involved in articulating aspirations, policy objectives might enable policy captured by powerful political groups by their own ideological ends. Political exploitation is more likely when policy content coheres the imaginary longings of the psyche. Okay. After the stop agency discretion 1, the Skidmore standard would replace still allows agency to influence the current 16 more Chevron on the court would likely to apply the Skidmore standard to interpretations of returning Chevron by statute might prevent the court from delegating responsibility. No act of Congress could force the court to completely disregard what agency says the law means. The courts would have the responsibility to accept the rejected, would have the irrational to disregard the persuasive arguments under Skidmore. A court would like to give an agency opinion whatever persuasive forces the reasoning deserve. The overturning Chevron would return the authority to the courts, but it would not eliminate the importance of the agency's interpretation. The agency position would have the same status, and two Congress and courts will both grant agency discretion. Chevron not critical. Let's again. Teach Chevron's critics to misunderstand judicial legislative rules and interpretation. Sometimes with the best construction of the statute is the discretion of the executive court prefers the judicial function by contains discretion by the statute. The interpretation undermines the statute delegates power to the executive. Is still an interpretation courts must read it ambiguous. The agency statutory delegation of private power to the agencies of the court is to interpret statutes including a minion in the agency to choose policymaker by power. The ambiguity, no difference in the express language. Congress could provide that the ambiguous instruction is to be understood. And third, interpretation by. Do you have cards?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, that's probably more important.
We'll sneak that right after.
Voting affidavits say sentimental fantasy of the intimate public in which the judge colludes with the one he sees to therapeutically cleanse the public sphere. This would not be viewed as a counter-public, as a disruption or any form of political change. Rather, the act for finding interpersonal relations in opposition to normative political conduct is a fantasy of transcending the obstacles that shape the historical conditions, undergirding anti-blackness and anti-queerness as it prolongs. The counter-public theory has one of the critical attempts to address the public mandation to dominate population. The counter-public model tends to over-dimensionate different things. The groups being the non-dominant subordination to the antagonist into the dominatory identities are not seen to intimate publics and elaborate themselves with a commodity culture that not on relation to modes of life are organized in the fantasy of transcending the obstacles that shape the historical conditions. Most non-dominant activities that are saturated with politics and the counter-public would suggest that by property specific the historical model can be specifically related to the events that they are back in the days. These social formations do not function at the level of theoretical pretense, even if the violence of fight force shape the historical formations fantasies operate imperceptibly. People live with the fantasy incoherently and even practice attachment and attention to the intimate public. It carries the authority to belong in the community. The public is an intimate foreground activity within an emotional attachment. The U.S. is a denigration of the political sphere. While utilizes these proximity sets as resources for providing exploitation of collectivity and constitutes the public intimate. The intimate public can provide outlets for all that you do claim to the members of every community. Exert the political one. The immersion attachment can become mobilized as counter-publicly.
Can we get that, please?
Counter-publicity. Sorry.
That was marked right.
Yeah, counter-publicity.
Can we get that, please?
Yeah.
I didn't read the third sacred card.
Yeah, notice that.
Caffeinating your judge, you should think. Yeah, you're welcome.
Back to laser tag, man.
Column plus 5 speed after this.
I don't have it. Okay, you good?
Yeah.
Case for Chevron charge you read is rather explicit about it only applying in a world where Chevron is overturned. How is that the F?
So it generally sets up the understanding within the courts to still
No.
defer. No. It explicitly says that the courts would still defer and generally look towards, or rather it would maintain the general
Yes.
structure that exists within
Yes,
the United
if
States,
Chevron
which
didn't
would still
exist.
mean that even if the F would, extend
Were
independent,
Chevron
the
gone,
courts would
overturning
still look
Chevron
at it the
would,
same.
that return authority to courts doesn't, not about the F. I mean,
No, it is.
The,
But it would not eliminate
the
the
Kent-
importance of agency
the Kent-
interpretation.
first, what are the links to the F?
So every card we read was pretty much the links
those
besides the
are.
alt and the.
Okay, and those are?
So the
So, yeah, go ahead.
So the first one is about why reclaiming sovereignty is problematic. That's
Why?
the main card. So it gives a couple examples, or a couple of justifications. So it actually lists them. It says first on signature statutes as equal nations, second on right to represent the constitutions, and third meaning of the rights and powers.
Yeah, you're right, it makes those claims impact, please.
The impact of them.
I
Yes.
think that indigenous nations are illegitimate unless the U.S. federal government recognizes their need for sovereignty.
Okay,
So
What is the
the-
cross-X?
the alternative,
Yeah.
I guess it starts with, or I guess my first question is, did you read the green or the yellow highlighting of the card?
green.
Okay.
So it should have been a no.
The alternative is a politics but a no to the affirmative. Should natives be able to self-determine their outcomes?
That's the wrong question.
Should, no. Yes, no, should natives have
The
the right to
government
self-determine?
should not be the ones
Not my que-
giving the
not my question.
natives that sovereignty.
How else are they?
No, my
Yes,
question-
that is, and the answer, that is our answer to.
How
your
else are
question.
they able to achieve self-determination in the world they have?
So there's actually some really good examples within Indian tribes, or Native American tribes, that allow them.
Mike?
So, alright, I have it written down right here. The Lakota tribe was able to take land and self-determine independent of federal government and independent of using like the INF or courts.
Okay.
So that was a tribe that was able to, external to the federal government, able to claim their own self-determination.
Okay, the Lundberg evidence,
Yeah.
can it result in the affirmative?
Can it result
It's a
in the
no to
affirmative?
the affirmative.
Is a no to, okay, and?
It's a no to the affirmative.
Okay, so the Chevron Indian law canons cannot apply in the world of the alternative.
So the law can
I'm gonna be
apply-
blunt, can you go for it as a floating pick?
Can we go for it as a floating pick? We have to win that the alternative solves to win that argument. So we're not gonna like fiat the F, but we don't think that the question of whether the plan should happen or not is relevant.
Okay.
We think we've indicted your specific practice and debate. That's a sufficient reason for you to lose.
Okay. You need prep, Solomon?
Yeah.
10 starting. Status,
It's conditional.
you gotta make sure.
Go for God.
It has other implications.
We'd get in so much trouble if we lost the contract with one off capability.
Status quo is always an option. For the judge, all presumptuous.
What was the case you referenced in cross-X, sorry?
So it wasn't a case, it was the name of the tribe. It
Yeah.
was the Lakota tribe.
How do you spell that?
Lakota.
Who refuses?
Oh, yeah, who refuses?
What?
Who refuses?
The judge should refuse the affirmative.
When did this instance with Lakota happen?
So it's not a single instance, but rather the general practice that they engage in. They've had multiple instances in which they have claimed and taken land that was, for instance, outside of their reservation, that the federal government did not allow them to do, and then they claimed it, took it, and lived it. I don't know if there's like one particular instance that I can point to, but it's generally.
I'm just trying to do some research about this, I'd be curious to. if you could give me a specific example, that would be great.
Are you talking to us or?
Yeah.
A specific example?
Yeah, the look hard tribe.
Not engaging the state? They
So,
don't-
so I gave you an example of when they,
Explicitly say that like members of the tribe are rather very like much so in the state. Like,
Save and send it.
remember Sean?
that's
650.
650. We stopped, crap.
It's okay.
Rip your phone. Too much inside. What's your order?
Advantage, solvency. Okay. Am I good?
No.
Two conceded internal links versus bad rulings. Every time courts refer to agency interpretations over tribes and impedes their ability to self-determine death. Native genocide. 2. Water deference results in actual poisoning of native water. Court rulings on EBA treatment as state provisions that would grant control over water rights and allow for native self-determination means they were implemented incorrectly. The plan refers to that. 2. Impacts versus lifelike self-determination and fisheries, cultural and political agency causing self-fear, psychic trauma. That's Wounds and Murphy. 2. Native genocide. Lack of self-determination results in racist decisions being made and acted in natives culminating in poisoning of tribal water supplies and in itself an overt act of native extermination. Solvency page. Assumes overturn of a group to alter circumvention cards assume overturn Chevron that was cross X and durable fiat checks. Otherwise the app would always look to inevitable roll back B as third of the plan. So post plan doesn't have to construe statutes and ambiguities in favor. Names when they come to conflict with the agencies and always against the violation of self-determination criticism. Our interpretation that the judgment is that the affirmative should be weighed against the competitive alternative. That's where debate A kills off ground zero. Chance to compete against an infinite for a theoretical position. We lose all benefits the without being able to test whether the affirmative is better than the scope. B justifies vague goals because they are not tied to specific action. Vague goals are voted for fears causing truancy, shifting, which not just debate is used as strategy and advocating the plan as the neck for is a voter for deterrence. B it makes being after impossible and artificially construction errors and bait to only things that can win failure, dispute, desirability to plan means weakens advocacy skills, and they've conceded a series of linkers to the criticism from the framing flows. The first one is material investment. The alternative situation in a political agency outside the state, allowing for settlers to maintain a monopoly on state power that crushes current movements to combat racial domination. Second is temporal representations. Y'all sure strands, names, and names that are stacked free state era to justify renew colonial imperialism, robbing names of political agency. The third is political representation. The advocacy of names adopting anti-state radicals is what settlers want by depicting them as so they can depict them as acts of savages in need of conquest and management, triggering renewed violence. That's all wounds and psychoanalysis. Not highlights card. Can you highlight the psychoanalysis card real quick? Permutation due both assholes and K ignores the next false choice. While their description of the school may be accurate, the space between foreign person and settler citizen is good, allows for the third space of sovereignty, solves all their links for Neil 7. Settler states assumption imposing temporal spatial limitation, additional evidence, additional action, speech, against cross-country articulate, third space of sovereignty, such as the admissible settler statement, additional political resistance, refusal, refusing, the false choices, someone no equal state for the agents to be over not equal sovereignty, secret, rethinking the government's role, but as a reach multiple nodes of sovereignty, multi-layer system, rethink the government's role, argued, had done what they can learn, and inherently incompatible with agents of autonomy, missing it, really formulation, precise concept, dependent on alternative post-colonial arrangement, rethinking sovereign freezes, choices that are both society, Aboriginal sovereignty, disruption of the two continuations about Aboriginal sovereignty as well possible, concurrent sovereignty as well, putting the digital sovereignty in political life that is seemingly impossible, not only but domestic U.S. and foreign today, no probably going to open to room but resistant to find the colonial repair that they keep to refrain about concurrent sovereignty, refuse the idea, equals the idea of an additional political actor, the additional refusal against the noted right power, movement, refusal to false sources of right to self-determination, recolonization, about accusation, they're trying to do identify express of sovereignty, transcend about the colonial sovereignty, sexually expand the local location of agents, political, policy on space of sovereignty, face of challenge that dealing with instability, the terms of the state matters, offer a third space of the sovereignty to us, political discourse, legal to alternative, matching the alternative political geography, the fundamental part of the effort, the viable alternative to the states, colonial consumption, sovereignty, deformity, colonization, change of federal law, recognize the power of the Indian nations, same as how can the indigenous resistance may not get ability to take into account strategies may use it to determine the checkerboard for the Indians and indigenous to checkerboard in the American political space that is new, so preserve the cause of undermining the intellectual credibility as state sovereignty, the map of the economy to light the demarcation political space and indigenous tribes of nations, as it is those settlers, the states, provincially subunits, complicated matters, close to seeing a multi-layered world allows us to see these indigenous historical spatial patterns and legitimate, and a particular example.
Can you read this? Sorry.
Go back to, yeah, sure. Go back to, right. Psychoanalysis as a violent form of epistemology, especially for names. Rule 1. Western psychoanalysis, friends psychoanalysis, critiques of general position, colonization, social manipulation, psychoanalysis, or trials, every day, epistemology, but also approach to Western discourse that are good intention, historically implicated in Western racism, colonialism, colonial power, however, the Asian increasingly seems like which they feel the Asian data, psychoanalysis, meaningful, cannot be distributed fair psychoanalysis in European position, in fact, alien, what racial domination, economic domination, social system, as I'm going to win it, maybe African American, maybe differently, maybe false standards, political practices, so about true powers, good evil, always know what it means by the case of an apparent, therefore the story of this man's life, and the after particular example, third space driver 18. Water public charge against the Trump self-represented workers for help not Trump people and operators using accused for the tribal self-determination of the civic charge of the tribal tribal jurisdiction over reservation with the accused of facilities from the government relations between water and federal agencies between tribal and federal jurisdiction management of preventive many tribal acts and accused of managers led institutes are operating with an implicit political against through the use of the use of the point that provides the strong agency and the negotiation quality change of the functions of the third space and negotiation tribal environmental self-determination water policy on the Arizona Senator Rosen and multiple sovereign negotiate over interest of the Trump WQs and territorial sovereignty were considered existing institutions already established. Jurisdiction sovereignty and WQs and African trans perspective limited. Limited trans ability to regulate the environment. Trump use Trump WQs and such spaces sovereignty able to use also the government church and contribute to individual trans ability to realize full range of operational self-determination. The alternative fails. It can't solve self-determination. It's probably a little fucked up. It doesn't say anything to the broader tribal management of urban lands or the capacity to resolve continual imperial legal interventions that have made these types of resistances always fail. The Lakota is no different. Beekeeping the native government management manages the enabling condition for colonizers to for colonizations what settlers want because they justify paternal doctrines saying natives aren't capable of governing themselves. Only after that's all wounds and interceptors. Alternative council to water state engagement with the state's key driver. 18. EPS tribal WQs to provide a regulatory positive term reservation ownership and influence offers and water use and travel operating and travel determination EV destruction as a result of complex regulations to advantage of the cancel the difference of EV's interpretation and environmental TNs and facility both offers and reservation for friendly approved WQs and individual issues and federal district to promote EV establishment just made a resolution process to try to process the policy to available as about the environmental economic interest of the WQs that are provided enforcement makes them modified management of preservation and funding opportunities and benefit the key from TAS Martha TSS.
You should say the Lakota tribe is an example of some people working
Yeah,
within the state.
The Lakota services, the Lakota example flows affirmative example of them because they make demands on the state in order to justify their acquisition of land. That will be further on. The links debate first the land link wholly not about the affirmative wounds evidence and critique about centralizing land within indigenous political strategies, rather about creating political spaces for native self-determination to make determinations over the political arrangements and political and cultural arrangements that they occupy, the borders link, the permutations laws, it breaks down the very construction of boundaries. Also, the answer to the land link implicates as well. The Brunel evidence is more to all to the two claims I made above. The desire link it's just a state link couch cycle analysis. State bad is an offense. Weaker the state is some fucked up shit. We don't defend role playing, we'll defend the plan. But the state is here and we can't get rid of the nuclear power. But the absence of a broader movement of self-determination place the demands on the state gains that have been proven to be effective, and you should prioritize both feasibility of something, clarity of political strategy, all terms that ignore rapidly pulling damage to native land resources, and most native moves are investing in positive orientation in the future soon negotiate advance for self-determination, try to frame your investment for decolonization, state and land collapse has happened, results in worse government outcome. 4. Governments and no government their predators and establishment of their protection for the obligated comes state or replacement will rule by government and eliminate predators and movement and establishment of further people. No government will find themselves taking over the rule over and the permutation solves the true track method reflects the red power movement and alone the can violently arranges indigenous movements that made gains on contingent demands on the state collapsing, native agency and returning the impacts of the K-Higson. 16. Indigenous active renew drafts or something and first ministries and visionary scholars will list proposed legislation we don't not just for the legislation we do not want to not legislation to tell about truth of the future rather return the culture Indian whatever the leave us alone existing for the link with the reform movement the red power pursuing civil liberty but also the anti-holding agenda emphasizing self-determination and demand research for liberal that's obviously challenging calling and ruling movements and where the interracial occupies the active terrors occupy to be out of you and need to give your work to hurry out to space and pursuing the link lens of this opportunity red power movement actions and reference change of public perception they carried over to water trends heals on earth interior resident legal president weapons to redress such as allowing colonists act use no longer who rank as colonizers so we were reinforcement they expand the jurisdiction exclusive resident compensation and return their lands for sovereignty.
Say from me, Beth.
I said permutation.
Are you ready? So there was a claim made about the permutation being good, or that the permutation would solve because the app breaks down borders. How does the app break down borders?
Well, firstly, I don't think the affirmative defends borders as being a proper orientation for how natives should invest.
Well, my question still remains.
I mean, your link is predicated on the affirmative
question
emphasizing
is, how
land and
does-
borders
My
as a
question
mechanism
is,
for
how does the affirmative break down our
indigenous
native
organization, which we don't think is the act. The second argument is that the Brunel evidence describes a way in which we create cross-cuttings of effectively concurrent sovereignties that break down the very idea of what is and isn't within a particular border. The Brunel evidence is very
What
different.
is a third space?
The Brunel evidence, which is, I would say that it's a space where in which indigenous actors use effectively the place where in which colonizers have placed them somehow being both inside and outside the state to create their own concurrent self-determination and sovereignty that can implicate the settler state while still necessarily being, not emptying the state.
Any reasons to reject the team? Theoretical reasons to reject
No.
The Vagals.
Vagals. Okay. Next question. Are either or one of you indigenous?
No.
Okay. So this third space in which we work within and without, which things should work within the state? Like what do you say within
We
the
think
state?
first of all, the term "we" is kind of weird here. The Brunel evidence is describing something that,
Sure.
describing a mechanism for indigenous people, indigenous resistance.
If
However,
it doesn't apply to you, why is it offense for you?
because the Hickson and the Wounds evidence describe the practice of the affirmative as part of being a broader movement
Okay.
to allow and develop
Get
that
back to
space to
the
be
fundamental
opened up.
question. If we can do both, which things should be worked within the state? What strategies are?
It should be concurrent, right?
Yeah,
The
it should be
affirmative,
concurrent. What should be in the
the
state?
driver and the Wounds evidence describe that we should use the particular powers of the state to create bulwarks against the state that
Yes,
defend
yes.
and allow
What-
for this third space to
I
exist.
understand generally your idea. My question is, what do indigenous people need to do within the state?
Use the mechanisms of the state, like the affirmative,
I
to
want
create.
specifics.
The Hicks evidence describes a bunch of examples if you want.
Okay,
It
that's
says
what I want.
Sure, it says that the courts that used and sued the government for fucking over their land and fucking over the treaties to get back rights over the land,
Where has
jurisdiction
that,
over the land, the
where
land
has that
itself.
suing,
They also
when has that suing resulted in any change in?
They
something?
literally got control over their land by the courts
When? Where?
in Alaska,
In Alaska.
and the
It's
fucking
cold and government doesn't care.
it also indicates that pressuring Congress and emphasizing self-determination as a mechanism to pursue cause a series of
2
reforms
minutes.
from Congress. We're good.
Case for-
Oh, your interpretation on framework was a competitive policy or a competitive alternative?
Competitive alternative.
Competitive alternative. Okay.
I'm gonna grab some time.
$525.
They're just two cards, so I'm saying in the body.
Do you mind just putting them in a doc, please? Thank you. Sorry, it just gets weird when you try to copy and paste that. header
It's
in
all
the
good.
doc.
I understand.
Okay. Did you send out the doc?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and there's probably just a delay on this, like, email in. You said, I got your first one out, yep, there it is.
Okay, cool.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
You said it's the K?
I didn't say that, but it is.
God.
Shocking powers of deduction.
Is there an overview?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not even gonna ask, I'll just put it on a new page.
Fair enough.
Give me a second, give me 1 second here. Are you good? Yep.
The subject comes into being through the failure of language and an inability to articulate the object of our desired debate. It's an exchange of simulated fantasies to fill the lack between what we want and what we say we want. This exchange of fantasy masks the passivity in the status quo because our ability to be good liberal activists requires an external other to respond to our demands. We need violence and conflict in the world to happen so the good arguments stay good. If we win this thesis argument, then it means that voting affirmative makes their politics less likely to be actualized and their impacts or dissats to an affirmative ballot. I think all the 1AC lines about the lack of sovereignty, lack of clean water, etc. are a little too on the nose in context of arguments on the left that there will always be a new group that needs the goodwill of UTT. You have conceded the agential fantasy argument and you have no index to the truthness of psychoanalysis. I guess you just have one card that says it's bad, but if we win that we are descriptively correct, then it means you cannot vote affirmative if we win our link arguments. This is the filter through which you should evaluate the framework debate. Every argument they win about giving us the capacity to change institutions skirts the question of our will to do so. Indigenous nations don't need the state. This will be big in the one and R, but they only recreate hierarchies of power because they assume that indigenous nations are weak and need us, which proves the kind of savior logic intrinsic to their politics, which is the brilliant argument. Also, they do nothing for indigenous people. They sort of just cut and paste indigenous laws and put them into U.S. laws and then pat themselves on the back. Ask yourself, what does the act do if the laws aren't implemented the way that indigenous people want? What if indigenous law changes? The U.S. law wouldn't change in response to that. Obviously, their argument is that the U.S. is super anti-indigenous in the status quo, which means that you should have no faith in the goodwill of political institutions to sort of react to changes in the world to protect the best interests of indigenous people. When you see cross-sex proves they don't solve pollution in water. Companies can still pollute just outside indigenous lands, and obviously the water flows onto indigenous lands. Every sort of case argument we win proves the lacking nature of their politics. They don't have an internal link to their engaging the state arguments. I asked about the value of their heuristic, and they're like, we're not defending this in 1AC cross-sex. The 2AC on framework was just like, we should get to weigh the plan for procedural reasons. It may be good for indigenous people to engage the state, but they are not that. They have no connection to the state or any defense of how their sort of heuristic is a form of engagement of the state that is productive, and the way that their movements suggest grassroots activism. They are not those things. They don't have a reason why that's them, which means you shouldn't allow the 1AR to have a new articulation, the permutation, the bueno evidence just says the refusal is bad. We are not sovereignty bad. This will be explained a little bit more later. The man evidence indicates that we are an indictment to the universal demand for sovereignty bad, proven by your argument that indigenous people need the state to recognize their sovereignty in order to have sovereignty, and then pathologizes the indigenous people that think otherwise, which is going to be a little bit later. The permutation is not very well explained. Our alternative is just to vote negative, which requires us saying no to the affirmative, which means that the permutation doesn't solve because it still involves voting F. It severs out of their sort of desires for their politics, which, if we want to link, is something that they should have to defend, because the thesis of our arguments about repetition, convulsion are reasons why voting affirmative only sort of continues the process. They say psychoanalysis is bad for Native people. This card is not about Lacan. It just indicts some book, and it also indicts Fanon. The card is kind of heavy on claims about psychoanalysis in some iterations being bad, but psychoanalysis is obviously a huge field. They need to have a specific warrant for why Lundberg or in our deployment of psychoanalysis is problematic in order for this to be offense. Also, the warning in the card is that it's bad when applied to indigenous people. Obviously, this debate is not indigenous people sitting on a couch and us analyzing them, but rather us sort of making claims about the tropes that you have made as non-indigenous people. So this card is an offense for you. They say the affirmative is the third space. They have absolutely not explained what the third space is. It just says that the card also says that the laws would only apply to indigenous lands, which proves our sort of water circumvention argument from the overview. They are not the third space they prescribe. They have made arguments about a heuristic being good. Obviously, we are not disagreeing with the fact that engaging the state can be sometimes good for indigenous people, but one, you have not done that, and two, universalizing that and saying that the indigenous people who don't do that are wrong or incredibly problematic. They say that the alternative can't solve for the affirmative. You don't solve for the affirmative either. Your only reasons for why you should get to weigh the plan or why we should focus on sort of instrumental conversations is for you, your ability to be affirmative in the game of debate, which proves our arguments about how the strategy always sort of predetermines the ethical commitment. So when the 2AR sort of postures about the indigenous people that are dying out there, you should not be thinking, oh, I should vote out to create an injunction in that, but rather that voting affirmative is a violent idea that you know best, and that you should resist the tokenization inherent in the affirmative's politics that necessitates them being saviors, because that only creates an investment in suffering so they can continue to save the weak indigenous people that need them. They say that engaging in the state is key to water. This driver evidence does, the driver evidence, I just answered that. I'm going to do the link debate here. The first is the Berlant argument. As forefronting of interpersonal relations in opposition to normative political content is a fantasy of transcending the obstacles that structure violence. Self-determination is about the re-theorization away from a politics of recognition towards a politics of place that is a particular relationship between Native peoples in the ways that they conceive of land differently. The 1EC finishing their affirmative with the plan text homogenizes those relationships into one. The relationship between indigenous people in the state is very complicated. To group them and say in aggregate they all want the sort of same things from the state is incorrect. There's also sort of trans-case argument, which is indigenous people still have hierarchies of power within their communities. You give power to the indigenous people sort of at the top that are making the laws, like people who own casinos, which obviously is problematic for the sort of the majority of indigenous people that don't have institutional power. You just play sort of respectability politics where you you give political agency to some of them at the expense of the others. The card says that in the intimate public sphere renders citizenship a condition of social membership produced by personal acts and virtues, especially originating or directed towards the family sphere, is proven by the argument that they don't think it matters if they solve the cultural connection to land for indigenous people. When I asked them, when I see cross-sects, what do you do about people who've been moved on to reservations to which they have no connection? They're like, that's not relevant. Those indigenous people, I guess, don't really matter. We solve for some indigenous people. The others can just kind of deal with it, which proves our arguments about them being a savior complex that are more invested in tokenizing them for the ballot than actually doing anything for those people. The second is the politics of demand link. Despite the nuance of their politics, their conception still remains caught up in what Lacanian theory calls an ethics of desire. This refers to their mode of social action that operates through articulation and affirmation of desired demands. Ultimately, the distraction of desiring open-ended demands only preserves the
hegemony of civil society, which operates through manipulation of fantasies as empty promises for emancipation. The impact is interpassivity. The F cosmetically deals with the issue and provides the illusion of action, delegitimizing the need for further action and solidarity. The F functionally renders us apathetic, which is networks. They say they critique essentialism. You literally homogenize all indigenous law by saying the government can copy indigenous law, and then sort of sovereignty exists for all people, which ignores the fact that there's a plethora of different sort of indigenous cultures and indigenous mechanisms of sovereignty that you cannot access with top-down solutions. You affirm a politics of recognition, which is the main evidence. It affirms a liberal version of sovereignty. Think of the K as a pick, not that does the plan, but out of the affirmation of Western forms of sovereignty.